Welcome to the Canacuro podcast, powered by Emerald Intel. I'm your host, Ed Keating. And on today's show, we're joined by Christopher Lackner, founder and president of the Hemp Beverage Alliance, the trade association representing the hemp beverage industry in the US and Canada with more than 375 members. Chris came to this work by way of the industry itself. He previously co-founded a New York-based CBD cocktail company and served as VP of Public Affairs for an international cannabinoid extraction company, and has spent the last several years building HBA into the most prominent advocacy voice for hemp beverages in Washington and in state houses across the country. And he joined us at what is really a consequential moment in the industry's short history, especially recently. So we've got federal ban coming. We've got states doing all sorts of stuff just even in the last couple of weeks. So what a time to be alive in the hemp beverage industry. So Chris, welcome to the podcast, man.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. So, just a little bit of history. You've described the hemp beverage industry as going from a loophole to a legitimate industry that's become sort of no big deal, but it's now considered by some to be like a $30 billion market. How did we get here?
Yeah, and when I say, we'll get back to my no big deal comment in a moment, but yeah, absolutely. So 2018, a real quick history lesson for everybody. 2018, the Farm Bill allowed for the production of hemp and all of the things that come with hemp. That's what spawned this industry. We had a little CBD craze that started shortly thereafter. It didn't really take off as expected. But folks found that by taking that small amount of THC that's found in the hemp plant, they were able to create these sessionable drinks that are THC infused at a time when alcohol consumption is in decline. So our category, the hemp industry as a whole is about $29 billion. The hemp beverage industry is a part of that. But we do envision, once a full regulatory system comes online, that we could easily hit $30 billion as an industry size, within 5 to 10 years. Wow. What is and honestly, this has got to be the fastest growing category in the history of beverage. When you talk about the growth that and the interest and the demand from consumers at a time when there's still all these cumbersome regulations or non-regulations. So you can only going to happen once everything gets level set.
So, in terms of who the industry or who the alliance represents, it seems to focus on like a specific sort of part of the industry, brewers, distributors, retailers, rather than the broader hemp industry. Why beverages in particular? Is it, because the growth was there, or because that was a coalition that sort of was forming because beverages with THC in them are a lot like beverages in other categories?
No, you're exactly right. So the Hemp Beverage Alliance has about 375 member organizations in the US, Canada, and even a couple in Europe. We're about 50% suppliers, the brands that you see on the shelves, and then 50% supply chain. Anybody from a can manufacturer to a lawyer, accountant, distributor, retailer, store, etc. We intentionally created this as a beverage-specific trade association because beverage is unique. It is a very specific consumer. It is thrives in a very specific environment. And what is game changing, and I think why we are seeing the acceleration of the category, is because it fits into that alcohol regulatory model already.
Yeah.
These you need to treat this just like a regular, and this goes back to my no big deal. If you treat this like alcohol, run it through the alcohol system, run it through the distribution and retail system that already exists in an age-gated alcohol industry, this becomes no big deal. It's just another adult beverage on the shelf and another distributor's portfolio and another choice for, responsible adults.
Well, I remember when we first met a couple of years ago, I think it was you who described that process in a way that sort of demystified it for me, is that these beverages tend to come in cans. Cans are part of six-packs sit in a case sits on a pallet. And the alcohol industry knows how to deal with that kind of unit, whether it be sold one at a time in a convenience store or perhaps in a case at, here in Connecticut, a package store. So I see the no big deal thing because it just fits. So
it absolutely. And all the systems that are in place for the alcohol distribution model work perfectly for this product. This product isn't really reinventing anything. It's just putting a different active ingredient into the products, the product formats that people are already used to. So we have these ready-to-drink cans. We have these 750 milliliter spirit analogs. We have wine analogs, each for different occasions, each with different flavor profiles, and one that a consumer is going to readily recognize just when they're picking out a beer, a wine, or a hard seltzer.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing I noticed, just a little bit of tangent here, when we were at that conference, I was really, I guess, surprised and impressed by how well people in the industry, especially hemp beverage, knew the unit economics, like how much it cost to put that THC in the can. It was the cheapest ingredient. Everything else cost more, or whatever it was. But like people really knew this stuff. It was truly a CPG moment as opposed to how are you feeling when you try this flower or whatnot, where it's much more, trying to guess, whereas this seemed not to be guessed at all. It was very cut and dried.
Yeah, there isn't, nationally speaking, there isn't a, well-known marketplace or well-known overarching thing for inhalable intoxicants or, edible, gummy intoxicants. But when it comes to adult beverages, we already have a system. And that supply chain is the same. These are co-packed, in breweries oftentimes. They're co-packed in facilities that already manufacture beverage. The aluminum cans, the labeling requirements, the testing for ingredients and for, materials that are not supposed to be in there. Like all of those systems are already in place and they've been tested. And I think going back to the whole distribution system as a whole, the 3-tier system for alcohol distribution has been tested for dozens and dozens of years.
It's the 30.
It is already, so, it's set up to succeed already. We don't need to create a new system. We don't need to, and the no big deal part is like the system already works. So why don't we just put these into the system?
So did that drive some of the market growth? Because the way you're describing it, it almost seems like, we took one of those empty beverage cans and put it in a pneumatic tube, and it just went shooting through right to the stores, like boom, because so many things were in place, so little had to be invented from scratch.
Everybody got it. Everybody knew about it, and this is that whole thing. How do you wrap if you are in the manufacturer, if you did beer all your life, and your father did, and his father before that, and then you get presented with gummies and flowers and vapes. Like you don't even know where to begin. You might as well be selling soap, right? Because it's a completely different category. But if you are selling a flavor forward, sessionable can of liquid that weighs the same 14 ounces that every other product on your shelves, weighs, that fits neatly into your conveyor belt just like every other one, and essentially and effectively provides the same experience for the end consumer. And remember, these are sessionable THC drinks, not designed to get you high, not designed to get you sitting in a corner rocking, back and forth. These are relaxing beverages, very much akin to beer, wine, and hard seltzer. Absolutely, you can get over your skis with a hemp beverage, just as you can get over your skis with a, wine or beer or whatever product.
Right.
But these are not designed to, if you want to go in a specific direction out in space, there's a dispensary nearby for you. If you want to have a relaxing alternative to alcohol that is a social beverage, hemp beverages are where you want to be.
Got it. No, well, that makes sense. So, obviously your organization picked a great path, got an industry that was ready, lots of adoption. I remember hearing the stories down in Miami from this guy in Texas who ran a trial in his stores, and in 2 weeks it took off so much that he put it into like 200 outlets or something. And it's just this giant portion of the revenue. But then we've got this weird state patchwork of regulations because why have it be fun and easy? And as somebody who has studied regulated industries my whole career, if you're on the compliance side, it's great because every state is its own fiefdom and sovereign nation. So it's great for the lawyers and the accountants and everybody, but it's certainly hard for the operators. So what's going on now? Because, we're tracking just recently, Texas, Georgia, Ohio, Missouri, all taking different approaches to hemp regulation, some rather draconian. What do you think's going to happen? Because I'm sure a lot of those 375 members are scratching their heads saying, WTF here.
Yeah. There's a lot of confusion in the market right now. There's a lot of, anxiety, to be perfectly frank.
Yeah.
That's all basically because of a couple of factors. One is that, in November of last year, the federal government, in their effort to open up the government, pass a language that essentially eradicates our category by November of this year, unless a regulatory framework gets put into place. And so on the federal level in DC, we have stakeholders, up and down the channel, working to establish, find, and get support for a regulatory framework that works for for hemp beverages.
Yeah.
So we have that going in one track, and that obviously gives a lot of the states pause. I will give a great example. Michigan, prior to November of last year, we had an entire stakeholder gathering, and everybody was excited about making the state of Michigan the hemp beverage, best in class regulatory system. They were excited because it was going to help distributors, it was going to help craft brewers, it was going to help entertainment venues. It was going to help everybody up and down the supply chain because of the downturn in the consumption of alcohol. Well, once the federal government decides to, unilaterally and without discussion, try to shut this category down, it kind of put the pause button on that, on that effort to get regulations in place in Michigan. And we're seeing similar situations happening in other states where they're looking, on one hand, they want to create a regulatory framework that works. On the other hand, why put all this effort into it if it's going to be shut down in November? And then there's states like Ohio that are using the actions that happened in DC in November to perhaps push an agenda that they already had in mind prior to,
Yeah.
There's some, be perfectly honest, and I don't think, this is news to anybody. There are some people that don't like, cannabis in any form, in any factor, and in any place,
Right.
at any time. But we do know this. We do know that in states where there is a regulatory framework for hemp beverages, the system, the product sells, public health is not compromised, tax revenues come in, and everybody wins. This does not detract from the dispensary industry because, as we mentioned at the top of the discussion, folks that want to go that direction, there's a much more affordable and faster way to get there, and it's not a hemp beverage.
Yeah.
So we know that in places where there's regulation in place, that the system works. And we know that there are 28 states in the country right now that have regulatory systems in place. They vary in degree of quality and success and good or bad. Minnesota was one of the first to establish a fully robust system. It is not without its flaws, but it's a very, very good start out of the blocks. We have states, Florida, Georgia, Texas, et cetera, that have varying degrees of regulations and confusing rules, but
and
we all
licensing.
know that everybody's trying licensing, but they're all trying to do their best with the tools that they have. And without federal guidance, I think that does present a challenge. This industry is moving very, very quickly. The past 2 years has seen tremendous growth. There's oftentimes confusion, and I'll give a great example. The state of Georgia, this is a consumer packaged good, as you said. This is a product that is more akin to alcohol than anything, and yet the Department of Agriculture was tasked with creating the regulations for it. And these were folks that probably never had to deal with labeling, right? But they just said, it must be agriculture. And you're like, we're just happy to have a regulator. We will work with you, But, until it's just going to take time for all the states to figure out what works best for them. It's going to take, hopefully, only a couple of months for the federal government to realize that regulation is the key to success. And then we're going to have this smoothing out of this regulatory anxiety and this huge boom, as I said, up to $30 billion for this category. You need to take a step back. It's very easy to be caught in this day-to-day battle, but this is just how new products and new policy happen. right? If you look at any other major advancement in society, I mean, ride sharing is a great example. It was like a patchwork of state regulations and sometimes local regulations until everybody figured out what it was and what it wasn't. Same thing. I mean, to be fundamentally like, bottled water had this problem, for those people that were maybe under 30, you might not realize this, but bottled water wasn't around all the time.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, that's a great point. I think, the normalization phase is going to take some time. I used to describe the cannabis industry and how states would, bring programs on as akin to the same stages that a group goes through when it forms, and forming, storming, norming, performing. There's a lot of storming there. It's usually when the lawsuits happen. I didn't get a license. Christopher did, blah, blah. But still, it's sort of a standard process with a lot of things that we all go through. Now, one area that I've always been intrigued by, and I think it's especially because this seems to be so prevalent in hemp beverages, is the mail order business. I mean, a lot of this stuff is getting shipped across the country, and what's to stop North Carolina, Kentucky, or pick your state that wants to protect their local industry? What's going to prevent those folks from being able to package up 6-packs and send them to states that have more draconian requirements?
Yeah, and direct to consumers has been a major point of discussion philosophically and economically within our industry. And there's a couple things to recognize. First is that when this category was first launching, direct to consumer was the only real way to reach your customer because of the, who was putting it on shelves in the first place. And then when you were putting it on shelves, maybe it was a small section or whatever. The one upside to not currently being regulated like alcohol is that, in states that allow it, you can do direct to consumer. This allows for small brands to, get a fingerprint or a footprint in a particular area. And we know that some distributors actually look to D2C data when they're thinking about onboarding a new brand, because they're like, do they have an existing customer base in our region, right? That's one of the things we learned last year. On the other hand, there are a lot of folks that are opposed to direct to consumer for this category over the long haul. And, specifically there are distributors who are like, we're fighting for this category. We don't want to, have it completely taken away from us or, taken away. But so I understand the both sides of the discussion, but what I know is that D2C for the adult beverage industry, alcohol, wines in particular, had a big boost during COVID. And that's because couldn't go outside and buy it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the shipping, the transporting, the shipping, and the paying for that shipping for heavy cans of water is not a long-term solution. And so what I see happening is, and trust me, as a guy that owned a CBD beverage company back in the day, getting emails from customers because the product was frozen because UPS left it in a truck and it was in the winter, cans exploding, cans leaking all over the place. And, just it costs a lot of money to ship heavy cans of water. So I understand the pros and cons of it, but what I think is going to happen naturally is that as this category gets more regulated and gets on shelves more, it's just going to kind of fade into the distance as a really not that big of a deal. I just throw to you, Ed. I mean, let's just say you're thirsty for a hemp, do you say to yourself, well, I could really go for a hemp beverage in 3 to 5 days. I'll go ahead and
that's an expert test. Yeah. My sourdough bread making works like that. I got to think ahead a couple of days, but yeah, you're right. For hemp beverage, I can just run down the street. They've got a whole wall full of them here. So
exactly. And so I think that, and we have seen, there was a big upsurge in D2C wine back during COVID, and it trickled, it continued on, and there are still wine clubs, and those are specialty things. But on the whole, I think that that D2C discussion and argument is going to fall by the wayside. Just from a natural economic standpoint, and also as this gets more entrenched in mainstream industry, there will be laws put up that says, you can't do D2C. And look, to be honest with you, brand new category, I don't think anybody's too worried about that.
No, that makes sense. Now, one interesting thing with this, in comparing it to cannabis, is that in cannabis, we have this model of every state comes up with their own rule set, and some things they beg, borrow, and steal from other states. Some things they make up, all on their own. Like, hey, Georgia, let's run this through pharmacies, or hey, Pennsylvania, let's think about running this through our own stores, whatever. So there's a lot going on. But once you look at the federal side, I've been in the industry 11 years and nothing has really taken off in terms of rescheduling. But on the hemp side, that's not true. So, we're running under this, 1 year timeline to November 2026 when, something bad could happen. Could it be an extinction event, et cetera? Obviously you've been in, it sounds like, lobbying, government relations roles before. What do you think is going to happen? One, looking forward, but how did that happen where suddenly something got snuck in there and, was a part of a big, beautiful bill that nobody read until the end? And then it was like, oh no.
It's easy to go, how did that happen? But go back to November 11th or 12th. Let's just say November 11th. We're on day 42 of the government not being open.
Yeah.
And this huge entrenchment by both sides of not being able to budge. And finally, a solution gets resolved. You've got 5 hours, 6 hours, 12 hours maybe to go read through 1,000 pages of documents or whatever. And somebody sneaks in a clause that says that the hemp beverage, the intoxicating hemp, or however it was framed, needs to be adjusted.
Yeah.
Who knows what that even means, right? So there's people who didn't know it was there. There was people who maybe read it and said, I don't know what this is. There's probably people who read it and got some talking points that this is, a good thing. And then there were some people that was like, this is a terrible idea, but we still got to open up the government.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So everybody was put in what is this called? Is a Dobson's choice, or I forget. I just learned this word. Hobson's choice, where a Hobson's choice, where it's not really a choice at all. You can either vote for this bill to open up the government, or you cannot.
It's like the sword of Damocles as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So the more you know. We understand, and we heard feedback from legislators shortly thereafter that were not, they were like, we have to open up the government. And now that the dust is settling, we're seeing this huge problem that was created, and we need to work toward a solution for it. I will say this, that, there are products out there that are derived from hemp that are causing harm, not just to the industry, but to the general public health, right? There are high potency gummy bears that are pretending to be other brands. You can get Stonios that look like Oreos. You can get, Scoodles that look like Skittles.
Right.
They are manufactured, God knows where, who knows if they're tested, but they have a ridiculously large amount of THC and other products in them. And those are a problem. They're untested. They are targeting, teenagers. And because they are gummies, it's easy to, eat 3 or 4 of them. It's, again, one of the benefits of the hemp beverage industry is that it's a little bit harder to get over your skis if you're drinking 12 to 36 ounces of these things, right? It's just,
right.
It just slows down the process. But a teenager passing around Skittles to his buddies and they don't know what's in them, and, who eats one Skittle, it does, so those are problems. And so I want to just make sure that we recognize when we're talking about, the hemp industry as a whole, there are bad actors that are putting a bad light on the hemp beverage category, as well as the CBD supplement category, et cetera. Well, so if we can get to a point where we can regulate the hemp beverage category and still protect public safety by getting some of those bad actors out of the space, that would be great.
Well, it also supports the point we talked about earlier of you are the hemp beverage council, not the hemp product council, not the anything you can get stoned on from hemp, product group. So
we're not
that makes a lot of sense, because definitely having a focus. So makes good sense. Now, as we look at the different constituents in this discussion, we have your organization, and the people that you represent. We have the federal government, and then we have sort of other lobbyists from, let's say, the traditional alcohol, distilled spirits, beer, etc. Friend or foe, or both?
Friend, yeah. Frenemy. Who knows?
That's right.
So, yeah, let me just break down. Generally speaking, we know that the alcohol distribution community or industry is generally favorable to this category because they don't have skin in the, like, as long as it fits on the truck and it fits on the dolly and it can fit on a retailer's shelf, they are perfectly situated to benefit from this new category.
Yeah.
The craft beer industry, generally speaking, is very supportive of this because craft beer is suffering a significant decline, and the manufacturers of craft beer can easily, adjust their equipment to manufacture these products. In fact, I will say this: you add yourself a couple of extra pieces of equipment, and you can be online making a hemp beverage pretty quickly. And what's great about it is that the time that it takes to manufacture a hemp beverage is probably 10 to 15% of the time it takes to manufacture beer. So you can have a product go from, pouring the ingredients to having it in a can in significantly less time, which means faster production runs, which means more efficiency, which means, more profit. So
you're the Southwest Airlines of beverages, exactly. Right? You're cycling those aluminum cans much faster in a way, right? So,
exactly. So, you get a pasteurization machine to, and a couple of other tweaks to your system, and you're pretty much good to go. Because remember, the architecture of manufacturing is the same. It's the same assembly lines, the same canning lines, the same giant vats that are going in there, whatever so I kind of lost track. So we have the distributors that are very supportive of this. We have the craft beer industry that is generally very supportive of this, and that brings us to the supplier tier for big beer and spirits. And I'm not going to speak on their behalf, but I can say that during the debate that led up to the November ban, there were letters sent from those organizations, letters sent to Congress saying this should not be allowed. This product should not be allowed until there are regulations. So they didn't say full stop, like this should just not be allowed but right. They're like, until there are regulations in place, this should not be allowed. That tells me that they're probably got an R&D system going right now to develop their own products. And once there's a regulatory framework in place, they're going to jump. Yeah. And it's entirely possible that they just want to all be at the same starting line, right? That the smaller, scrappier, more risk-friendly, smaller industries or organizations out there, which is kind of the nature of business these days. They're more nimble, they can pivot, they can take more risks. And maybe that's what it is that they just want the starting line reset so that we can all compete equally.
Yeah.
We know, without getting into great detail, as I said, anybody would be a fool to not have R&D on this. Yep. We know that there have been test products. We know that there is interest in the category. And so it just remains to be seen as to what happens in November when there are regulations in place, or if there's a temporary pause on the category, or if there's an extension on the ban to work on regulations, what those industries are going to do. Yeah.
Well, and that could easily happen. I think just because with good lobbying and people as thoughtful as you to sort of speak and help normalize and get people to understand it, that it's not some big, bad, scary thing, especially as we see how well it's done. So, speaking of that, a couple points that you've made are, suggesting that people go take a look at Minnesota. And I remember being out at the CANRA conference 2 years ago, and I think you may have been there as well. Your meeting, I think, was right after that, but there was a lot going on there. Like the regs had just been passed, I think, and they were mixing and matching cannabis and hemp regulations together with alcohol. I mean, it was really something that, we hadn't seen before. So if people do go out to Minnesota, what should they be seeing? Is that still a good sort of test bed or exemplar that people should be like, wow, these guys got it right, or they have it more right than others?
Well, I'd say going to Minnesota, the best thing that you can see is how no big deal it is. And going back to that original
Yeah.
premise, like, you go into a restaurant and these products are on the menu, and it's not some sketchy, hot dog cart kind of thing. Like, you go to a restaurant near the Capitol building and you can get yourself a, pan-seared salmon with couscous, and you can match that with a THC beverage on the menu.
Huh.
You go to the liquor stores and you see that there's shelf space, sometimes 32 feet of shelf space of these products. You go to, a venue to go see a show or whatever, and you might see these products available right next to beer, wine, and hard seltzer. What you are not going to see is a zombie apocalypse. You are not going to see people, roaming the ground, with empty cans saying, brother, can you spare a hemp beverage, right? Because that's just not what is going on. This is another adult beverage that is being sold responsibly to people over 21 that are using it, consuming it as they would a beer, wine, or hard seltzer. Yes, there's going to be maybe somebody that gets over their skis. We had an outdoor event. We had 300 people with an all-you-can-drink 4-hour sampling event. We had one person that was just sitting down in the corner, and I asked him if he was all right, and he's like, I just didn't bring sunscreen. Right. I mean, our 2 security guards did nothing. The EMT that we had gave away 1 Band-Aid, and that was to a woman that had a cut before she got into the facility. As the event, again, 350 people or whatever it was for 4 hours, by the 3rd hour, it had gotten quieter, not louder, as people, became more relaxed. And when everybody left, I swear to God, the facility was cleaner than when we set it up.
Oh, wow.
And so, we have this data, this real human data of people enjoying these things and enjoying it responsibly and not turning into the Walking Dead or whatever worst case scenario that gets envisioned in people's minds.
Yeah. Now, you've argued, and I think I heard you say this at that conference, that these beverages normalize cannabinoids in a way that they're not now, and it brings new people into dispensaries. Where I live here in Connecticut, they separated high THC, well, they call high, 10 milligrams, have to be purchased in the dispensary. Low THC can be bought at my local, beer and wine store. Is this how you see it rolling out? Where, like I said before, my local store has a whole wall of, varying beverages, hemp, CBD, THC. Is that how it's going to suddenly be more approachable to people who don't maybe want to go into a dispensary?
Absolutely. There's a couple of things. One is, actually, there's a whole bunch of things. Let's unpack this. So I live in Colorado. I can get my beer and wine at a grocery store, but if I want spirits, I have to go to a liquor store.
Yeah.
So in the alcohol and the adult beverage marketplace, there's already an understanding in a lot of places where there's a division between the two. There aren't protests every, week about, bring spirits to grocery or get beer out of grocery. It's just an accepted way of life. So we envision and see a situation in which your experience is kind of universal. Sessionable beverage, THC hemp beverages sold in liquor stores or 21 plus age gated locations. And then, dispensaries handling that harder stuff, that stuff that is flour, that is gummy, that is, high potency drinks. It absolutely makes sense. It's a different customer. It's a different experience. And it's a different understanding. These beverages, low dose beverages, do exceptionally poorly in the dispensary system. They take up a lot of space. The dollar per milligram ratio is terrible, right? You have
to get locked in a vault in some places too at night, right?
Right. And imagine being your 110-pound bud tender, having to, 22 pounds per case, having to, bring down 5 of those, 6 of those, 8 of those a day. It's not going to happen. So there's all kinds of reasons why these products don't work in dispensaries. The corollary to that is that somebody who, let us just suppose, and we're not saying that this isn't, this is our end goal, but consumers these days, adult consumers, are familiar with the beverage form factor, right?
Yeah.
Everyone knows how to enjoy a drink. They understand how to calibrate, et cetera. Now, suppose someone like my father, who would never go into a dispensary, who would never inhale anything and may be very nervous about what a dispensary is because of, his history. He's older, grew up at a different time. Maybe the dispensary, because of the way that the laws are set up, maybe they're in sketchier places than most. A lot of times these are in places that you don't ordinarily find yourself being. He's going to be very hesitant to go in there. However, if you get yourself acclimated and you see, THC isn't what I was taught in 1960 or 1950s, if I realize that the experience that I'm feeling is something positive, and maybe I need a little more relief, maybe I'm going to be more inclined to go into a dispensary. Maybe that might break down a barrier for a customer who ordinarily would never go in there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So as we sort of wind up, one forward-looking question I wanted to ask Chris is, where do you see this category in 3 years? I mean, we've seen so much happen in the last 3 years. What might be the best case, worst case, or what do you hope it'll look like 3 years out?
All right, so here's my bold prediction: is that in September, October of this year, there are going to be enough regulatory bills being discussed at the federal level that folks are either going to pass some kind of regulatory bill for hemp beverages, or they're going to extend the deadline to say, we're making great progress, let's keep this moving so we can get this regulated.
Yeah.
So that's a best case scenario, and that one that I remain very bullish on. So that gets us to 3 years from now. I'm going to, write this down and mail it to myself, but I go to minor league hockey games often, and I go to Budweiser Arena in Longmont, Colorado. Somebody is going to go to Hemp Beverage Arena, right? Somebody is going to go to a minor league baseball game, and the patch is going to be sponsored by Hemp Beverage Company. The ubiquity of the category is going to be just like what we see with adult beverages already. It's going to be insinuated into the public life just like hard seltzer came in, right? Hard seltzer came in, brand new category, never existed before, brand new flavor profile, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There was like, all right, let's bring it in. And there wasn't some cataclysmic thing. It was just insinuated into the commerce, and we moved on with our lives. That's the other thing is that we're going to see. We're going to see ubiquity and no big deal.
I love it. I love it. Well, so Chris, how can listeners learn more about the Hemp Beverage Alliance and perhaps get involved?
Absolutely. There's two things that you can do straight away. hempbeveragealliance.org is our website. Go on there. You can join. You can sign up to our newsletter, etc. If you are active or want to be active in the industry and want to get your toes wet, the hempbeverageexpo.com, our third annual expo, is going to be in Austin, Texas, June 17th and 18th. We had 1,200. Well, first of all, we had 300 people at that one that you went to in Minnesota. The next year we had 1,200 in Atlanta. We're expecting 2,000 in Austin, Texas this year. So if you want to meet everybody under the hemp beverage sun, this is the place to be.
Excellent. Well, Chris, we couldn't have ended with a better call to action. So thanks very much for joining us today. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you at a conference before too long.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.